Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the controversy involving Sharon Osbourne and Sheryl Underwood on The Talk? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So here I'll offer a brief background, then go through the timeline of the incident in detail, and offer my analysis. Sharon Osbourne was born in London, England on October 9, 1952. She married Ozzy Osbourne in 1982. She has been in a number of films and television shows, just to name a few: The Osbournes, The X Factor, America's Got Talent, and The Talk, which she has co-hosted since 2010. In 2002, she announced that she had colon cancer, which had spread to her lymph nodes. Even though the survival rate in her situation was about 33%, she survived. Since that time, she has donated to charities that conduct cancer research. Now moving to the timeline of the incident on The Talk, which was related to this whole situation with Piers Morgan and Meghan Markle. We start on March 8, 2021. Piers Morgan, a British TV personality, was on Good Morning Britain when he said he didn't believe anything Meghan Markle had said during an interview with Oprah Winfrey that aired the night before. Meghan had talked about serious topics like mental health and racism. On the CBS talk show, titled The Talk, Osbourne reacted to the situation by saying that she supported Piers Morgan. Now moving to March 9. After a dispute with one of his colleagues on Good Morning Britain, Morgan stormed off of the set of the show. Osbourne reacted by indicating that she believes people forget that Morgan is in a position where he is paid for his opinion. He's a royalist, and there's nothing wrong with that. After this, it was announced that Morgan would no longer be on Good Morning Britain. Osbourne sent a tweet saying, "I am with you, I stand by you. People forget that you are paid for your opinion and you are speaking your truth." Now moving to March 10. Early in the broadcast of The Talk, the topic, this whole situation with Osbourne and Piers Morgan, is brought up on the show. Osbourne said that Morgan was exercising free speech. She went on to say that she did not like or agree with everything he said. She pointed out that people were calling her racist, even though she supported him for his freedom of speech. Underwood believed that Osbourne was giving validation to Morgan. Another co-host talked about unconscious bias. Osbourne went on to say, "I feel like I'm about to be put in the electric chair because I have a friend who many people think is a racist, so that makes me a racist." Then we see this awkward moment when the show is going to commercial. Osbourne tried to say something, but it was censored. The discussion had clearly continued during the break. When the show came back on, Osbourne said to Underwood, "If anyone should be crying, it should be me." She went on to say, "Educate me. Tell me when you have heard me say racist things." Underwood suggested it was the implication and reaction to it, but she did not want to seem like she was attacking Osbourne or calling her a racist. Osbourne responded, "It's too late. I think that seed is already sown." Now moving to March 12, Osbourne went on social media and said that she apologized to anyone of color that she offended. Piers Morgan got onto social media and said Osbourne was being shamed and bullied into apologizing for defending him against colleagues accusing him of racism. He went on to demand an apology from The Talk. CBS said it will be investigating the show that occurred on March 10. They're conducting an internal review. Moving to March 13, during an interview, Osbourne said that she blames the network. She was blindsided by the whole situation. She suggested it was like being in front of a firing squad. So here we see a reference before to the electric chair, and now she's moved to the firing squad. This takes us to March 14. CBS announced that The Talk will be on a brief hiatus. It was later extended on March 16 into the next week. So at first it was just a couple of days, then it was extended. Over the next few days, Osbourne would go on to deny a few claims of racism that have been made. These are outside of what's going on with the situation with Piers Morgan. She indicated that she doesn't feel wanted on The Talk and called what happened on The Talk the biggest setup ever, saying she was a sacrificial lamb. Now moving to my analysis. I think this case can be broken up into three different components: Osbourne's original defense of Piers Morgan, the showrunners at the talk allegedly deciding to focus the discussion on Osbourne without her knowledge or full knowledge, and the following intense discussion between Osbourne and Sheryl Underwood. Looking at the first part, Osbourne's defense of Piers Morgan. Osbourne was fairly clear in her initial statement. She suggested that she was defending Morgan's right to free speech, to offer his opinion, but did not necessarily agree with his message. This is actually a fairly common sentiment. There are a lot of people who value free speech. This really doesn't strike me as a radical stance. In life, people sometimes stand up for other people. They defend the right of others to do certain things, even if they don't approve of everything the other person does. Moving to the second part. Allegedly, Osbourne was ambushed by this discussion about her defense of Morgan. This is what she is saying. If that's true, and I don't know if it is, then I think Osbourne does have a point. It makes sense that if they wanted to have a protracted discussion about this topic on the show, Osbourne should have been made fully aware of the extent of the proposed discussion. Apparently, Osbourne was only expecting a couple of questions. She didn't think it was going to end up being as long as it was. Osbourne felt as though Underwood was calling her a racist. This was her perception. If Osbourne was correct, then it makes perfect sense she would have a strong reaction to that. That allegation far exceeds the available evidence, especially considering the discussion wasn't about any prior accusations. It was specifically about Osbourne's defense of Piers Morgan. If Osbourne was incorrect, then she failed to capitalize on an opportunity to have an interesting discussion about racism with her co-hosts. A separate point on this particular part. Another question that could be asked here is, should this have ever been a topic of discussion? Was Osbourne's defense of Piers Morgan's right to free speech really connected to racism, or was this really an inflammatory accusation? I'm going to illustrate this point with a fictitious description of a homicide. Let's say that a person was killed inside their residence by an assailant who apparently used a pry bar to break in the front door and then used a hammer to beat the victim to death. This gets reported to the local news, so everybody in the area is aware of those basic circumstances of the crime. The next day, a few construction workers are on their lunch break. All these individuals have various tools in their possession, including hammers and pry bars. If one of them turns to the other and says, "Hey, I noticed you have both a hammer and a pry bar in your truck. Let's talk about that homicide." I guess what I'm getting at here is that I don't know if Osbourne was really connected to racism in that specific behavior of defending Morgan. Therefore, what would be the point of discussing it? What were they trying to figure out? If one person antagonizes another based on a false premise, they lose the right to complain about an appropriate defensive response. This takes us to the third part, the intense discussion. In this discussion, we see that Osbourne tells Underwood, if anyone should be crying, it should be me, and then of course the discussion continues for a little bit until they break for the commercial. It did appear as though Osbourne was defensive. She may have had a right to be, but her expression of defensiveness was pronounced and probably a little too intense as compared to what the co-hosts usually do. My guess would be that this is the reason CBS wants to investigate, not necessarily because of the first two parts. The irony of the situation is that Osbourne did something similar to what Piers Morgan did. There was this overly defensive response, an inability to talk through the subject matter without getting excited. Now, she didn't storm off the show. Her response was much more controlled than what Morgan did, but again, similar. My overall opinion on this is that Osbourne was fine with the first part. I don't really see a problem there. Perhaps justified in the second part when she was upset about being accused of being a racist, and maybe she overreacted a bit on the third part. Therefore, I see this as kind of a break-even for Osbourne. I certainly don't see her as any type of hero or villain. Another question here is, was this cancel culture? I don't think it was. I think of cancel culture as when people prone to conspiracy theories view everybody as having some type of terrible bias, like racism. They see it everywhere, and they believe that very subtle clues indicate this attitude. Just like people who think the CIA is spying on them because they see a surveillance camera at a traffic light. It's a tendency to believe that one has special knowledge about this massive conspiracy. Now, of course, attitudes like racism do exist, just like the CIA certainly does spy on people. But the question is it so prevalent that essentially everybody has the characteristic, and it's just a matter of finding it in everybody? Does everybody for the CIA spy on people? Is everybody on the planet racist? Or are some people not racist while other people are? Now, racism is highly prevalent. It's a real problem that needs to be addressed. But the cancel culture conspiracy theorists see it in everybody. In this case, this seems to be CBS doing this to themselves. I don't think there was some massive outcry by cancel culture conspiracy theorists against Osbourne. In a way, I think that really says something. Her behavior was so subtle that cancel culture didn't pick up on it. A group that, in addition to being irrational, is extremely sensitive. So sensitive they can find what they're looking for in just about everybody on the planet. I think one of the solutions in this case is for people to stop accusing one another without evidence. It's like people making the accusations don't realize that the person that they're accusing may actually be innocent. So they understand the concept of guilt, but they never really learned about innocence. It's like believing that a coin has heads but no tails. So they only understand half of a situation. So I guess we're supposed to believe if they flip a coin, and of course they can only expect heads, and they end up getting tails, they just look at it and they're confused. I don't understand how tails could be an outcome from flipping this coin. It is important to understand all sides of these different debates. My last point here, situations like this bother me mostly because I feel like vigorous discussions are being frowned upon. Regardless of who is right and who is wrong, I like debate. I like it when people can have a conversation about their disagreements. It would appear that the critical thinking skills and flexible thought required for these discussions has vanished. Those are my thoughts on the situation with Sharon Osbourne and Sheryl Underwood. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.